Strive 365 coming to you live. This is JP Kato Casey with my co-host Hassan Rahim. This is our peakcast episode 2. We got a special guest here for you guys, our very own Dr. Danielle Winston. Welcome.
Dr. Winston, we're very excited to have you. This is Hassan Rahim. JP, thank you for introducing our guest. I'm going to give a little bit of her accomplishments before she starts talking.
Wait, before she even starts talking, we got to talk about the first time we met Dr. Winston in the first place. I think remember back then, I think it was about maybe a year and a half ago, we went to a Strive 365 retreat in Chicago, and we didn't really know her yet, but it was a training seminar, and she was very informational on how to deal with childhood trauma. We learned about ACE scores. I think that was actually the first time we actually saw the peak team curriculum of what we went through. So I thought that was a really cool experience and a good impression she set upon us.
Yeah, and obviously while we were there, we know Dr. Curry stands out with his big, tall height, you know. But Dr. Winston, you really stood out. Just the way you conveyed the information in a very candid way. You really taught us a lot about trauma, things that I had never even heard of. I didn't know much about trauma, very basic knowledge, but you really shared it in a very effective manner, and we were very excited to get to know you. So Dr. Winston went to Nicolet High School. She's actually the third most famous person there. Shout out to Jalen Johnson, future Duke Blue Devil. Very excited about that. And obviously Oprah went there as well, but Dr. Winston beats her. So she's number 2.
Into number 2.
She made number 2. So then Dr. Winston went to Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where she double majored in Spanish and psychology. That's amazing, by the way, so she can actually work with people who speak Spanish as well and English.
The rest of the interview in Spanish only.
Spanish only? So JP, I bet you didn't know this. Dr. Winston still holds the most career double wins there.
Wow. And, man, that's crazy because I feel like everyone in our organization, they play some sort of form of tennis. And, our organization is not about tennis, but I guess that's where we kind of originate from because tennis players are kind of like the most inspiring workers in this trauma-informed industry. So.
Yep. And then, Dr. Winston, you went on to go to graduate school in Chicago at Chicago School of Professional Psychology with a concentration in child and I cannot say this word, JP.
It's adolescent.
Adolescent psychology. We laughed about it because I said I wouldn't be able to say it. Then you got your doctorate in psychology in 2016, which took you to do a pre-doctoral internship in Florida, which once again, you worked with people who predominantly spoke Spanish, the Latino sector of Miami, which we're going to get into in a little bit. And then, Dr. Winston, you did a postdoctoral fellowship at a therapeutic day school back in Libertyville in 2016 and 17. Now you are working at a group private practice in Skokie, Illinois, and you're also working with Strive 365. Do you kind of want to touch on those accomplishments and how they really led you to being the successful Dr. Danielle Winston you are now?
Wow, it was kind of crazy just now hearing you read them back to me because just running through all of these different years and all of these different kind of hoops I had to jump through to get my degree and be where I am now. It took such a long time and was such a process. So it was just kind of interesting just now hearing you kind of read them all back to me in chronological order, because at the time it just felt like, it was such a process and such a journey. But it's neat to be sitting here now and listing them all back and being able to just think about wow, I really did do all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really, I feel like something kind of unique too about, all of my different experiences is, I think from reading them, you can kind of hear that I've been able to work in different communities and in different places throughout the United States. And it's just given me an abundance of experience. So that's been something that's been kind of neat about all of my, different,
which ultimately led you back to come into the Midwest. And would you say, since you've been around very different areas, Do you truly believe that the Midwest is one area that is suffering through trauma at a higher rate, or can you kind of speak on that?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. I feel like the short answer to that question is no. I feel like the longer probably answer to that question is that I think, in my experiences in working in different areas and populations throughout the United States, I've found that, I know that right now we're in the middle of this pandemic. The big problem with the coronavirus is that there is no immunity to this coronavirus. And that's like really the big issue right now. But when I think about that, I think about how that is so true to trauma, and, what is kind of the experience with trauma is that there is no immunity when it comes to trauma. Wherever, it's sad to say, but wherever you live, it's something that you have the potential to experience and go through. I think that reflecting on all of my different experiences, I would say that maybe in different communities and in working with different populations, different people maybe are more likely to experience a certain type of trauma, but that it doesn't change the fact that like anybody can experience trauma. One thing I do want to comment on too, as I'm speaking to this, is that although people, anybody can experience a trauma, I think it's really important to note that everybody's experience of trauma, the way that people experience trauma, nobody's experience is the same. And because of that, the way that people cope with and overcome the effects of trauma, it's not black and white. Everybody copes with and processes and deals with trauma very differently. So that's the long-winded answer to your.
I like that answer.
That's great. Yeah.
That's great.
And like again, you said, trauma has no barriers. Whether what race, color you are. But along with that, speaking of trauma, can you give us a brief background of what do you do for Strive 365 exactly? So for all of our listeners.
Oh, sure. Yeah. First thing that I really worked on as part of Strive 365 was developing the curriculum for the program. So a lot of, I like to say that I kind of helped provide like the skeleton to the program. Yep. Because what our program is that it's a trauma-informed program. And so what that means is that each of the lessons that we aim to teach the children and their families have trauma in their, in their makeup. So I guess the exercises are intended to help people, really learn, kids, I guess, to really understand and learn what trauma is, what it feels like for them, and then how to overcome the effects of trauma. In addition to development of the curriculum, also works at is not only the exercises and interventions being trauma informed, but also it provides kind of like a guideline for coaches so that coaches also can learn ways to approach the kids that we work with, and in addition to like the families that we work with, as well as each other, in ways that are trauma informed.
Each, like you said, there's different ways they can approach the kids now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We haven't really talked yet about trauma, today, and like what it means, but I feel like everybody kind of has like a basic grasp of what trauma is. And when you think about trauma, really no matter what type of trauma you experience, your trust and your just like feelings of safety are really threatened by trauma. Whether it's that like your safety and your trust in the world, or whether it's your safety and trust in other people, that's really something that's impacted basically no matter what kind of trauma you experience. And so when I think about like those interactions we're talking about right now between the coaches and the kids and the families, and also, with each other too, that is just something that is so crucial, is in our communications, just developing like that trust and supportiveness and, making one another feel safe. That is, that's something that's so
it's key. It's key.
Yeah.
I agree. Like, I look at the way James and JP both, they're actually not called JP and James with the kids. They're called Coach JP and Coach James.
Right.
And then I sometimes come in and I'm Coach Hassan, but very rarely. But just the trust the kids have with them is so great to see. Like the kids come running to say, Coach JP, and honestly, you see that comfortability they have with our staff and including you. They feel comfortable to want to communicate with us and work with us, and that's one of our biggest things. Is along with all of our partners, is we all just want to make sure the kids feel comfortable and we're someone who they can speak to when they want, when they need, and we can be there when they need.
Exactly. I think just like, being in the trenches myself as a coach, I want to give you credit for creating this curriculum because it was easy. It was an easy curriculum to read and implement with the kids, and really provide me the necessary tools to be successful. And then I think, when I first started the Peak Team coach and in our programming, the kids, they weren't really opening to me, but as I implemented the different craft methods and the different methods to get to know the kids a little bit better, they really opened up to me. And like what your point saying is really building that relationship for them to kind of open up to you. And to kind of segue into that, we do this with every one of our guests. What is one word that would relate to trauma for you?
Yeah. I want to just comment too on what you were saying before that, JP, is that after developing the curriculum, I've also had the opportunity to kind of be in the trenches with you guys. And man, I've seen Hassan, I haven't seen you coaching yet, but I've seen, you coach JP and Coach James. I've seen you guys just really interacting so well with the kids and just really approaching them and understanding them in a way that makes them feel comfortable and safe. So I just wanted to comment on that too.
Cool. Thank you.
So your question was, what's a word that
will relate to trauma for you?
Relates to trauma. I feel like it goes back to what I was saying earlier is safety, but I guess lack thereof. And, again, trust, but again, lack thereof. Right. So both of those words really come to mind to me.
I like those. Those are very unique.
So for this question, what does trauma, you work with kids, what does trauma look like from a child perspective? How would you break that down?
Another really good question. You guys are asking me some stumpers. I think, like I was saying earlier, everybody is so different that, we all come in with our different backgrounds and experiences and cultures and ethnicities. So I guess speaking to that, every kid is going to come in and have their own and different experience when it comes to trauma. But when I kind of think about trauma and what it feels like for kids and adults too, is I kind of think about being in a haunted house and when you're walking through a haunted house and you just feel like you are so on edge and you're walking around and you don't know what's going to pop out at every corner and every turn. You never quite can feel safe and comfortable because you just don't know what's coming next. And I think that when I think about, kids as well that have experienced trauma, I think that their world feels really similar. It's again, I feel like that's the word I've been saying a lot today is just that difficulty feeling safe and trusting in your world is how it feels to be a kid that's experienced trauma and hasn't yet kind of overcome its impact, its effects yet.
So let me ask you, Dr. Winston, when you say that there's the lack of trust and safety, what do you do on a daily basis to help the kids overcome that lack and turn it into a pro, to be honest, where they feel they have that safety and trust with you, such as they have with our coaches as well? How do you attack that lack?
I think that a large part of it, I'm going to speak to a couple of different large parts of it, but one of them is really just the idea of consistency and being there. For so many people, I guess, focusing on kids, so many kids who have experienced trauma, consistency and stability is something that's been lacking either in their world or with, different people in their lives. And so the ability for myself in my work to be that consistent and stable person, to show up every week and be there every week, to try my best. And, I can't, sometimes I make mistakes, but to try my best to, remember what everybody, all these, children I work with, what they share with me, what they talk about, that is part of my ability to show up and be there and be that safe person. And I think another key piece of safety and trust is also communication. Without communication, it's really hard to feel that sense of safety and that sense of trust with somebody, and especially, with kids. So, with the kids that I work with now, their parents and their caregivers are a large part of our work. I'm just using this as an example, but if I'm bringing the parent or the caregiver into the treatment, it's crucial for myself to be able to communicate with the child or the adolescent or whoever I'm working with, about what I'm going to be sharing with the parent or the caregiver, and just to really keep them in a loop. So I guess in general, that kind of just speaks to the imperativeness of communication and honesty. So in building safety and trust, again, the long-winded answer to your question, I would say that those pieces are crucial. So communication, honesty, safety, consistency, and stability. So there's 5.
And it's not just with that was a really good point you brought up that I wanted to share as well with our viewers. Is it's not just with the kids. You also want the parents, the guardians, the whoever's looking after the child. You really want them to understand what we're doing as well. So it doesn't just implement during our time with the kid. When they go home, it's something that can be implemented there as well, because we want this to be something that becomes embedded into the child's regular day.
All right, and definitely want it to be like a culture thing where it's not just like one-time thing, but it's everyone's using it. And you spoke to a good point as well, saying that you try to be there consistently for the student. And I think you really spoke on the peak team model, where we really try to establish trust and always continue to be there for our students and our partners. When we have our sessions for 2 weeks, we make sure all of our coaches are there for that day to kind of give them our best and give them all that we have to give those students the attention they need and crave that trust. So you really spoke on our peak team model on that. And even right now, when we're on this, COVID-19 pandemic, we're creating content, videos, blogs all over our website to kind of stay in touch with our students and, our partners as well. So, that consistency and being there for those students and our partners is what we do. So that you hit that on a good point.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. We want you, everyone listening, we do want you to take a look on our website. We will have some updates of videos that Coach JP and Coach James are doing. Hopefully I'll get involved in those too. But I'm telling you guys, our team is very dedicated. We're trying to stay active, do whatever we can during this time. I call JP during the days just to see what he's doing. He's been pretty active during these times, as is our whole team, Dr. Curry to all the way down. And it's just, we want to make a difference. We want to be there for you guys. Our goal is to just continuously fight for you every single day and give you that fight that we believe you can do it. So, Dr. Winston, nowadays, as we're all going through the very weird situation, but it's becoming a norm, unfortunately, and we don't really have an idea of when it's going to change. With the COVID-19 kind of preventing us all from meeting, and really social distancing has become something new to us. This is a new adjustment for you, as I talked to you recently about this. The virtual telehealth, I researched a little bit, but hearing it from you, I think our viewers would get the full take on it and understand it a lot better. Do you believe that the virtual telehealth is really effective, and what are the pros and cons of it? And obviously talk about how it's been a new adjustment for you as well.
Yeah, definitely been a big adjustment for myself. In around mid-March is when I, in my practice, started to make the switch from doing everything telehealth and doing everything virtually, of course, to be safe and think about the safety of the providers, but also of the safety of all the people that come into the office. To answer your question about its effectiveness, personally, I feel like there is nothing like meeting in person with somebody. So 10 times out of 10, I would choose an in-person session over doing a telehealth session. Given the times and given the circumstances, that's just not a possibility right now, and not a possibility that like really thinks about and considers the safety of one another. So it's just not possible right now, and not possible, at least for the time being. So speaking to its effectiveness, I think that in person, in my opinion, and I don't know that everybody would agree with me, but in my opinion, an in-person session is probably more effective. There are things that you don't get from doing a telehealth session. You don't get to see some of the nonverbals. The other sort of like more personal moments are kind of like lost. However, at the same time, I also feel like, we've been talking a lot today about trauma and a lot today about just like the importance of consistency and stability. And I think that, more than anything, what I've been able to do during this time and what I've really been able to provide for the children and the families that I'm working with is this ability to just provide some, sense of normalcy and some sense of like, consistency and structure and stability in a world right now that just feels so unpredictable and so not normal. While I think that, like I've been talking about, in-person sessions, I think are more impactful and more powerful, at least in my eyes, I also think that, just the ability to be there for people and provide that supportiveness and consistency right now is making more of a difference than I think I'm probably even able to realize.
Okay. Thank you for your opinion. And I think,
a little bit more than an opinion with her expertise, right?
Exactly. So that's expertise right here. And I think from what you said, it's better to actually do like a telehealth call instead of not getting the service at all, having to wait, because these kids are kids that are in need. And so being able to at least be there, via telephone or telehealth, I think that's way more effective than what we can be, what we could
instead of doing absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I really kind of want to build on what JP's saying is, nowadays kids it's not going to stop. The trauma is never going to stop. The word I always use is continuous and an everyday fight. It's not going to stop, and we've found ways to still implement it for our partners, such as JP and James making those videos. I think that's going to be very beneficial. But Dr. Winston, everyone on our team obviously plays a pretty vital role. I think everyone's an ace in their own way. I always say you're one of the most effective team members we have. And I think this is a very important matter because mental health and wellness is just so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think just one more comment on this is that, I feel like, and I keep saying this, but I feel like the times right now are just so uncertain that I think that, when that JP and James are going to be like coming on, the video screen at 1:00 on Tuesday, or, you have a session with Dr. Winston on Wednesday at 6 p.m., whatever that might look like. I think just to have that certainty right now is it's just so important for people.
And it's a relief because with uncertainty, we just don't know what's going to come, but we know we have something.
Exactly. Right. And so, Dr. Winston, so kind of talk about the beginning of things. How did you first get involved with Peak Team? How did this idea conceptualize? And also, how do you plan to, help our kids that we work with in the future? What are your goals for that?
So my family grew up in Milwaukee, and my family's a really big tennis family. Myself, my 2 siblings, my 6 cousins, my grandpa, my aunts, everybody played tennis. So, JP, I think earlier you were saying that like it's a very like small Milwaukee tennis community. And because of that, because I am and like have been such a big an active part. My family has been such a big and active part of the Milwaukee tennis community. It allowed me to kind of like come into contact at first with Dr. Brandon Curry. And so that's how I really kind of like got involved in Peak Team, is I was able to link up with Dr. Curry, who presented, this is like back before everything had really started to evolve with Peak Team. He presented this idea of the program to me, and I was so excited about it. And I think the second part of your question was, what do I hope for moving forward with Peak Team? One of the reasons I was so excited to come on board with Peak Team is because, I wrote my dissertation in graduate school, and my dissertation was about sports and mental health, and how sports can help people overcome mental health difficulties, and that sports should be being used more in the world of mental health. And so when I spoke with Dr. Curry about this idea of Peak Team, it was like exactly what I've been studying and researching and thinking about how to incorporate into my own work. So moving forward, I am just like so thrilled and so excited about the idea to use sports and other modalities to help kids and families just like overcome and mitigate the impact and effects of trauma. In my dissertation, I talked a lot about some of the things that we've been talking about today, how sports teach such crucial skills like community and camaraderie and communication and teamwork and trust, and all of those skills and all of those lessons are exactly what helps kids and families like overcome the impact and effects of trauma. So I'm so excited to continue through our program to, really build on that. And the other thing that really just excites me about our program is that, earlier as you were reading through my credentials, I work in a setting right now where people come into the office and they have access to mental health care. But we're seeing today with the coronavirus that not everybody has access to healthcare, and it's really unfair. The people that do have access are getting treatment and they're getting care, but the people that don't have access are really the ones that are suffering. And the same thing's true with mental health, is that, there are certain people and certain members of populations that do have access to mental health care, but not everybody does. And so one of the best parts of Peak Team is that it is able to provide services, mental health services, to kids and families that like otherwise would not have these opportunities.
That's definitely, I definitely love how you point that out. Is that's our main goal. We want to be able to provide for the kids in Milwaukee, and hopefully in the future, JP, as we've talked about it, we would love to grow. I mean, we know that Milwaukee is our first start, and we want to make a massive difference here. We definitely do, but we know there's other areas that we can also impact, and that's our future goal, is to grow as well. And Dr. Winston, there was another cool thing you said about how sports plays a role. So I would say, so for me, for like growing up, basketball was my sanctuary. And growing up, I learned over time how sports really does help out, such as everyone in this room has played either basketball or tennis. Every shot you take, it's either going to be a make or a miss, right? But that shot shouldn't affect your next shot, just as in life. We're going to make decisions, and there's going to be times where it doesn't go as we planned. It doesn't, unfortunately, work out the way we want. But guess what? You may get that next opportunity, and you get a chance again to do it. So it's not that you missed one shot and you're never going to get a shot again. We will always be able to have a shot if we have the proper help that we're trying to give. And that's what Peak Team's goal is. We want to give these kids a chance and the opportunity to really find themselves and the potential to grow into successful young people.
Right. Yeah, sports is a lot like life.
Yeah, and I think like just like tennis, you're focused on every point. Not you're not focused on the set, but just every point in the game. And when I played tennis in high school, I feel like once I got on the court, you really just focused in the game. You didn't really worry about homework or the life stresses that we had back then, which wasn't that major. But it just took you away. And I think if when these kids are working with us, playing in the gym, they're having a good time and they're not really worried about those outside distractions that are causing them to be stressed. So great point. And I guess just to kind of wrap things up, do you have any like tips or suggestions on how to deal with stress every day for students or parents listening? Like what are some tools or some advice for parents to tell their kids or kids to kind of listen in?
Yeah, I think that one thing about trauma is that people who experience trauma can sometimes feel very isolated and feel very alone. And I think something so important for kids and families to know is that they're not alone. And so I think that if there were one takeaway from today, it would be for, any kid or any parent, family that's listening is to know that they're not alone. And also to seek support and seek out help.
Well, that's something that we're going to do, and especially something you are wonderful at.
And that's right. That's what we aim to do with Peak is we aim to provide that support. But if anybody ever needed extra or more support or wasn't getting the help they needed, to just make sure to ask for it and to know that our staff are there and are going to do what we can to help and provide that support. Also, just always knowing what your relaxation and coping strategies are and using and practicing those.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Winston, we want to thank you for being here on Peak Team, coming to the peakcast. We're very thankful to have you as one of our most effective team members, someone who brings great expertise for all the viewers who heard or will hear us. We're very thankful for Dr. Winston to provide this type of information and advice, and we hope that you guys take it and it helps you out. And just to let you guys know, we are always here for you guys. Peak Team never ends. Strive 365. We are there 365 days of the year. And
during a pandemic.
During anything. We are there for you guys. We always want you to know that. And we're thankful for you guys to give us that opportunity to help you. And Strive 365 coming to you live. Thank you guys. Have a great day.
Hey guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the peakcast with Dr. Danielle Winston as we covered the obstacles of COVID-19 and how the different virtual and in-person platforms changed her work style, but also that you guys learned about child's perspective on trauma. Next week, we'll have a special guest, Mr. Luke McAvoy from the Hmong American Peace Academy. He's a high school educational leader that will be providing updates about his school, along with how sports can impact trauma and how it impacted his life as he was a football athlete at the University of Minnesota. Go Gophers!